This is a general walkthrough and guide going through the full Unity project created by myself, Cal Thorndike, Lin Zhao, and Yuan Wang. And it's going to be talking for the full project of everything that was shown in the final build of this project, but also showing some of the aspects which unfortunately didn't have time to incorporate into the final build, but still want to show some of the progress and work that was made into this aspect. So this first scene here, which you'll view on screen now, is the introduction and menu screen, which is basically just a small island surrounded by like, animated water, with these single characters currently sat around them on the different assets and chairs, each with a animator. Each with a animator that is on screen. So if you look around, you'll see them dancing behind you. And then currently here, the XR rig is placed here, which is above a small, so like just white sphere with the feet models there. So the player looks around, will see the kind of like a seagull body, but not being able to actually move around with it. It's just static in place. It'd be great if in the future we could actually have like a full rig, set up so the body would work like that. But currently, it's currently what we have. And yes, the player can't currently move or walk around because there's no continuous move provider, but there's a term provider allowing them to look around the environment. And then the instruction scenes are shown here, and they will cycle through one another using the animator and show one after the other, fading through, showing the title, the creator of it, and go through some tutorials before then going to the next scene. And each scene is managed through a scene changer script, and there is a canvas here that is currently always on the camera, which will fade in and fade out to show the next scene. And after going through the main menu scene, it will then load up to scene one, which is the beach and pier segment of the whole experience. Why it's loading now? Okay, and this is the full beach and pier segment of the whole experience. So the whole thing is kind of built up as quite like a very large scale map using the buildings that Yuan found in our package for the city theme as the backdrop, and everything here has been created like sort of manually. Everything has been placed as individual assets by myself and sort of created over the course of a couple of weeks, where each bit asset was sort of placed in individually. And yes, and some of it. So I took the whole pier FBX file which I got online, extended it, changed it, and moved it around and copied it around to make this sort of larger scale pier, and then also include like some some water again, and also some different assets found on the asset store, including beach chairs, umbrellas, lifeguard tower, lamps, and also this boat model here, which I added animation to as well, which I've given a bit most of the background. And then the benches and the bin here are created by Mariana Caprio from Free Animation, and then the ice cream cart here is created by Esme Duncan, and so are the ice cream assets as well. This child asset here, which is using the scene, is from the asset store and edited and molded by Esme and Mariner as well to have the animations. And yeah, so and then the main scene takes place all down here, and it is set up using a teleportation area. So when the players on the beach, you see this screen bit here, they'll be able to move around and use the right hand trigger to try and teleport to different area, which then also triggers the sound effect of the wings flapping. And there are also some boundary borders around the walls, which means they can't leave this area, but they're not so high that they can't then teleport up to the pier area, which is set up in this way as well, where there is a teleportation anchor, which then if the player points their controller towards here, they will then be able to spawn at this point here, and then spawn again. There's another teleportation anchor at the ice cream pier, which will then also allow them to come here, and hopefully they won't fall off the bin that's standing on next to the ice cream cart and be able to trigger the mini game. And essentially, so when the full experience starts, they'll start down here, spawn in this area where the XR rig is currently in place, and they'll be able to go around a sort of like a small sandbox area. They can grab the different objects, such as some seashells. There's like a beach ball they can grab. There's a spade. Just little things they can mess around with if they want to in a given time. And then currently, when they start, they'll see this orange sort of sphere here, which is under navigation, which will do like an animation fade in, fade out effect, which basically just there is like a little kind of point towards them, which we'll admit that if we had more time, we would have loved to have had a much more better navigational guide, or like more glowing effect, something to draw them towards it, maybe some text, maybe some voiceover. But this is what we sort of put in the given time, and we will also admit that we wish we had time to incorporate more of a tutorial area, because currently all the player really has to go by is the starting text at the start of the experience, which explains the general controls but doesn't really go through the whole thing. So we would have preferred it to have had a proper tutorial where the player could go to the beach and actually learn the controls, because currently I know how to play it, but it doesn't necessarily mean that everyone will know how to play it, which is an unfortunate thing. But it's what we could do in the final build. We're happy with how it turned out, but that is a definite thing we would definitely want to do if we had more time. And currently as well, so you'll see that there are two single characters here, which we explained in our report how there are some problems with exporting, so they're a bit jagged and a bit low poly, but they do work overall. And again, we wish we had more time to sort of try and figure out how to incorporate these better. And currently around the seagulls, there is the beach animation trigger, which has a very large script attached to it, which when the player enters this collider, it will then trigger the first animations, and these characters will start moving, and then the dialogue will start playing as well. So it's set up currently, again, we have some problems with the file formatting and the FBX files animations, which were given to us by Esme Miranda. Again, they were learning as well on how to do it, and we had some issues where the file names did change slightly over the duration of this. You'll see here there's some different, like adjusted, there's a Savior Seagull, and then there's like the official beat justice. So there's a file different names which they were animating on, which then meant the animations wouldn't attach to the base rig. So I had to do it where I had to find a workaround in the time we had left to be able to do the animations without them having to remake them all again on the same rig. So I had to do this method of having sort of like layered characters, which then were stood in the exact same spot. So luckily they do appear over one another when they active and set active false. They do appear in place. There's a slight jitter, and you do see a change, but it does work overall in the grand scheme of what we had. Yeah, but overall, each segment is kind of separate in different animations, so each one's got the different sort of animation take and scene in place. And we did have an idle animation, which we tried to incorporate, but again, because there's problem with different file formats, we couldn't include it. But the animation is made, and it is in their file submission. But at the moment, just the base animations are currently on play, and we had to make a few different animators, which then triggered by the scripts on the Beach Anim Trigger 01 to then play different animations. But overall, in the scene, it does work pretty well overall. And like as well, like the character spawns as well with some different objects such as the stick, and also the fries, which again is great. And then the character can actually grab those objects and interact with them, and so on, such as is here. But it spawns in the script at a certain event in time. But most of the experience currently is scripted so that it's done all in order, and it's timed more than interactive. So you can grab things and something's happened, but unfortunately, as a player, it's quite scripted and you don't have much control. But again, I think if we have more time, I would love to look more into that, how to have them actually react and using events, which is something I'm still learning into, but we don't have time to do it, unfortunately. But it's what you can do at the moment. And both seagulls also have a box collider around them, which means that if you grab like such a stick object or any other objects in the area or the speech bubbles, you could trigger them into this collider and it'll play the hit or like smacking sound effect that was created by Kira and GHM in this scene, which would work quite well. And overall as well, for each animation scene as well, there's also the dialogue bubbles which also spawn at different points, which again we tried to make interactive, having a box collider and sound effects involved, but the Geotime Restraints don't have that, but they do appear animated in sequence with the dialogue. Probably could have been done a slightly bit more in depth and better, but it's what we could do at the moment. So this is essentially the beat sim. Once that's completed, then the next navigation point appears up here, showing like another little sort of bubble. And when you go up here, you're able to spawn here, and then go over to here again, which also has another collider, which is the trigger for the mini game, which is here. So when you step into it, it will start the mini game, and this canvas you'll probably see back here will appear on screen, do a countdown and score every time you grab these ice creams. Will spawn around this area. It will do a countdown and give you a score, and then it will say stuff at the end. And there's also a secondary trigger, which is in the same location for the single animation, which works the exact same way as the one on the beach, where it will trigger single animations events and the different dialogue boxes, again, such as the ones that will appear around it, and they will go for a sequence, and so on. And when the minigame is finished, it'll also play another animations linked to the child that will start moving and start crying as well. And once that's completed, the canvas fade will happen again, and then you'll go to the next scene, which is the sky scene, which is also quite another short scene and had a really great soundtrack that was also created by GHM. And Yiran spent a lot of time as well working on these clouds as well, which will appear here, which appear all around, and they move, and they move with the camera, work fantastic. So the full thing is created, so it's just like a general solid object which your player can stand and walk around on. You can still use the continuous movement, continuous turn provider, and also boundaries as well, which means that the player cannot fall off of the bird, which is quite handy because it happened quite a lot when we didn't have them. And also the bird's wings also have quite a funny, like, an animation effect, which they'll move up and down as they go through the scene, which is quite enjoyable. A little thing, but it worked quite well. And the same again, the dialogue boxes appear animated over time, so they appear as the dialogue plays throughout the scene. And the player is also able to actually get to grab these ones. And we did want a script which meant it will create a sound trigger of the objects hitting the birds, but again, because there's certain height difference and everything, and grabbing the objects, we didn't have time to include it. But the script is written, and it's like a sound trigger, which is when you interact that glider with an object, it will obviously, like the seagulls with the stick, it causes a smacking sound effect. It's exact similar to this. This is the full scene, a very short one, about 30 seconds long. And then this is, we'll show the credit scene next, because the next scene in the final build, which is exactly like the introduction scene, except it's slightly different. When you start in the middle of the island, there's no body, and you just have the two seagulls stood behind you looking normally, and the skybox is different, like it's a sort of moon, like a sunset, end of day, showing the end experience, and it'll go for the credits in the exact same way we did the introduction. And one thing I should probably say as well, actually, what I did mention, was that the player's hands are currently in the scene, just showing off a different area, because we had to spend time sort of moving and changing around. There was animation created of that other hands animated, but we couldn't get it working again due to some FBX exporting problems and importing Unity. The animations were again created with Marina and Esme. But yes, we have them sort of off the side of the scene, and a reference there where then they shows the player's hands within the scene. Now the third scene is the city scene, which unfortunately we didn't have time to actually incorporate and include in a final build due to time constraints, and we didn't have the animations quite ready in time, and we probably thought a bit over ambitious in some areas, but we definitely wanted to show what we did have in the actual scene of the experience for the city scene, which is now shown here. Yes, this is the full city scene that Yiran found, and sort of inflated and changed the parts of it to work better. So this is the same buildings we used in the beach scene, but it was found by Yiran. So this scene was mainly sort of edited and changed by Yiran and Lin. So the initial plan was to have the scene sort of start down here, and we showed this in the presentation of screenshots of that. We would have the crowd of people walking around this area. So it's like an animated effect of loads of people walking around to show, the cat landing in the city and loads of crowds, and then going sorry, 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 which is sound effects we had created as well, which was mostly edited by Lynn and imported into project. There's currently like a different version, so we can't show that here, but we have screenshots of it. And the year we spent some time as well going through the scene and having smaller tables and stuff ready for the XR rig to be put in place, which we have here, so the player can go into the scene. They'll start here, and then we'd have similar to the beach scene up here, we'd have the single characters in place, triggered animations that make them move to certain locations and move around in the environment, show dialogue, etc., etc. They would sit around a small table and have those scenes, and the different dialogue we had in place and planned. We also have this here as well, where we had these supermarket that was edited heavily by Yuan to incorporate in this exact area, which he copied different bits and moved doors around to create this sort of supermarket scene next to the dinner, because the store we had was they were sat at the table and then they'll walk over to the supermarket and steal the food. And she animated the doors as well to be ready, so there'll be a trigger here and the doors would open, and then the next scene and story dialogue would play out in full. But yes, the overall this is the sort of full experience we had planned. We're really happy that I managed to get the menu credits, scene one and scene two, playable and mostly working. There was definitely some polishing and some bugs that we'd love to get fixed, and definitely a lot more elements we'd love to add in, like tutorial, more polished animations, having odd animations, more reactive movement, maybe some NPC characters. There's so many more things we'd love to do, but in the time that we're given, we're happy with what we're able to achieve, and this is what we want to show. But we definitely want to show the city scene off, because we spent a lot of time working on the general environment, just didn't have time to incorporate the actual layer of gameplay and animations that we plan to. But yeah, I hope this covers everything we did for our project, and thank you for listening.